This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome. I am Brianna Wright, Executive Director of the American Subcontractors Association Houston chapter. And with me today is ASA member John Prince, Executive Vice President and Underwriting Manager at Adams Insurance Service, for today's hot topic discussion with an industry expert about indemnification, additional insureds, and completed operations clause in an Acord form. First, John, thank you so much for being with us today, and I appreciate your time to go over this. So this clause was brought to my attention by one of our members. So let me first start with just reading the clause so that way we're all on the same page. So the clause says, and all indemnified parties, along with their respective officers, agents, and employees, shall be named as additional insureds and provided with waiver of subrogation on the general liability, including completed operations and automobile liability. The general liability shall also include primary non-contributory basis, including completed operations, CG 2026-1001 and CG 2037-1001. Those are important. All policies include endorsements providing 30 days advance written notice if the policy is canceled or changed, except for 10 days notice for cancellation due to non-payment of premium. So John, when you and I spoke about this earlier, before I could even tell you what the concerns were from the member, you spotted a couple of things in this clause that you didn't like. And so I want to make sure that we cover all of them. So first, let's start with the fact that this clause was in this member's Acord form and not in their contract. And then secondly, all the parties listed, the officers, agents, employees, under the indemnified parties seemed a little bit odd, didn't fit quite right. And then third, the inclusion of completed operations concerned the party who was to sign off on this, adding to your concern about the CG form addition dates. So with all that being said, I will let you start unpacking what all is wrong with this clause and what a subcontractor should try to change in it if they can.
Yeah, so thanks, Brianna. I mean, let me first talk about the Acord. You know, your member said that this was not in the contract, but it was in Acord. So a lot of times what we see is that they will have a mock-up or a sample Acord certificate that's completed out the way it's supposed to be completed out with all the coverages, and they will attach that to your contract as an exhibit. So if it's attached to the contract as a noted exhibit, you know, it is basically part of your contract. So I suspect that's probably what happened there. You know, on this particular thing, you know, he was concerned that it reads whoever his client is, Inc., and all indemnified parties, officers, agents, and employees. You know, honestly, we see that type of wording a lot. And when they say all indemnified parties, that just throws it back to the indemnification agreement, which usually includes the general contractor, the owner, and then they might specify the engineer or architect or other parties that are all going to be part of that indemnification. So when they refer back to all indemnified parties, that's really what they're referring to. I think it'd be better to restate who they actually want to be additional insureds here rather than do it that way. If they want the general contractor and the owner, then they should specify that. And a lot of times they'll throw in something along the lines of, and any other party required the contract documents, so that it draws in, you know, the contract between the owner and GC as well, which we see that a lot. You know, on this particular form, the thing that jumped out at me was they're specifying CG 2026-1001 and 2037-1001, which, you know, when we see that, we try to get those changed. The 2026 is probably really not the best form to use. It should really be a CG 2010, which is really for construction operations. But the last four numbers in those endorsements have a lot of meaning. They're the addition date. So they're requested an October 2001 addition date, and there are numerous additions for each one of these. And those forms for each addition date are different, very different. So those addition dates are really important in determining what they want. And in this case, the 1001 edition is very broad. Basically, it just says that, you're going to be an additional insured on our policy if the injury or damage arose out of our work for you. That's it. That's the only qualifier there is to them being additional insured. So it's a very low bar that they have to get over to get access to your policy and your coverage limits. We always try to get this amended to show an addition date of 0704 or 0413. Those are more recent additions. And what they've done is they've come in and added another qualifier in there for the additional insured to get coverage. In addition to rising out of the operations, the injury or damage must be caused, at least in part, by the acts or omissions of the named insured on the policy. So it makes it a little bit harder for the additional insured to get access to your policy and your coverage, which in the long run is a good thing for you. The more claim activity you can keep up in your policy, the better you're going to be. Plus, it doesn't erode your limits for whatever liability you may have independent of the general contractor or owner. So it's always good idea to try to limit that scope as much as you can. And the 0704 and the 0413 both do that. And a lot of times, people will change that and make that amendment for you. Sometimes they won't. And if they won't, at least you tried. And most carriers can provide this coverage, although they may do it on a specific basis rather than a blanket basis. So most people have blanket additional insureds that basically says, if you sign a contract that requires the other party to be an additional insured, then they're an additional insured. So this wording about, officers, agents, it basically covers whatever's in the contract. But if you have to do a specific, it's only for the parties named on that endorsement. So a lot of times with these broader endorsements, they'll do them, but they'll want to do a specific just for that one entity and or that one contract.
Okay.
But better to get it reduced if you can. Let's see. Oh, you said something about completed operations. So
right.
The 2037 is additional insured for completed operations, and the 2010 or in 2026 is what that one is for your ongoing operations. So that's why there's two forms, one for while you're out there working and one for after you completed the work. So that's pretty standard. The 2037 is almost always required. That's where they get additional insured coverage even after you've completed the work. Usually they'll specify in here somewhere how long that you have to maintain that complete operations coverage. It's not unusual to see it for 10 years or the applicable statute of repose, whichever is longer. In Texas, it's 10 years, which, that's a long time. You're basically agreeing to maintain and renew your insurance for 10 years when you sign that. So, we always tell our insureds if they can get that time frame reduced, that's good. Just lessens their obligation. And it lessens their obligation as the additional insured for the completed operations coverage. So if you can get it reduced to 3 or 5 years, you're better off than leaving it at 10. But a lot of times contractors are pretty firm on that 10 years since that's the statute. So you just kind of have to play that by ear, but it never hurts to ask on these things. What else did we want to do? We miss anything there, Brianna?
No, I think that was it. The whole list of indemnified parties, the completed operations. You like you pointed out that the problems with the forms that they have specified here, which when the group that looked at this, our C-suite leaders peer group, and that's how it was brought to our attention that one of the members of that group said, "Hey, is anybody seeing this?" They didn't pick up on that, so I'm glad you did, because that's a very important part. You get the wrong form and you're liable for no matter what anybody does. You get a dated one. You got to have at least a little part in what happened in order for it to be held responsible for it. So I think that's it. Is there anything else about this that you would like for our members or subcontractors to know, or do you pretty much cover everything?
The only thing I'd point out is, since they refer back to indemnified parties, there's obviously some kind of an indemnification agreement in here in the contract. And a lot of times people do a lot of work on these insurance specifications, you know, trying to narrow down the scope of them, like talk about using preferred addition date to try to reduce their liability. But if you don't also try to negotiate the indemnification at the same time, you really haven't succeeded at what you're trying to do. It's really both places have to be in agreement. You don't want to agree to more under the indemnification section than you've agreed to do under the additional insurance section. So it's important to try to do the same thing in both places.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, thank you so much for taking time to explain this. I actually understood what you were saying, so if I can understand it, I'm sure that our subcontractors will understand what you're saying, and that's great. Again, thank you for your time today, John, and you have a great rest of your day.
Sure, thank you.